You wake to the sound of chickens. Not a gentle chorus, but the kind of squawk that feels like an alarm clock with feathers and poor social skills. The sun is barely up, its light filtering through the cracks in your wooden shutters like honey spilled on linen. You roll over on your straw mattress which crackles in protest, and stretch until something in your back pops medieval chiropractic at its finest. Outside, the village is already humming. A cartwheel creaks, a dog barks twice, and someone somewhere is arguing with a goat. This, you think, is going to be one of those days. And shoes so thin you can feel every pebble in your path, like medieval acupuncture. You splash your face with water from a wooden bucket that smells faintly of yesterday's soup. Refreshing, in a way. You get dressed rough wool tunic, a rope belt that definitely used to be part of a fishing net. We post new slow stories every week, and if you're still awake, comment your location and the time you're listening. It's oddly comforting to know who else is dozing through the 14th century with you. That lane, by the way, doubles as the local thoroughfare, communal gossip hub, and occasionally, a place to lose a boot. Brewed with boiled water and fermented with grain, it was far less likely to give you a stomachache, or worse. Her wooden barrels are lined up like sleepy soldiers, each one marked with a chalk X and smelling of barley, yeast, and just a hint of ambition. Even children drank it, albeit a much weaker version called small ale. Think of it as the juice box of the 1300s. The smell of damp earth mixes with the scent of freshly baked rye bread wafting from the baker's hearth, a reminder that someone, somewhere, is already doing better than you this morning. Now here's your warning, you probably won't make it through this day. The village green is already dotted with activity musicians tuning lutes with the enthusiasm of cats yawning, children running barefoot, a few sheep pretending they're not planning something. And bring the good one this time, not that cracked thing from last year. Not because anything dramatic is coming, but because life in a medieval village moves slowly, smells strong, and requires more patience than a modern Wi-Fi connection during a storm. Modern science would disagree, but medieval drinkers swore by it, or possibly swore because of it. A man you know only as Thomas the Loud is already 2 cups in and explaining something complicated about pigs and astrology. You nod as if it all makes sense. Wooden tables are set outside with loaves of bread, pots of stew, and yes, jugs of ale, their handles worn smooth by generations of celebration and maybe a few regrettable arm wrestling contests. But don't worry, you don't need to survive, you just need to listen. It was one of the few trades that allowed women to earn income independently, though, when their popularity grew too much, some were accused of sorcery, because naturally, success must be witchcraft. He offers you a bite of pie. You don't ask what's in it. Before we continue, if you enjoy this sleepy stroll through history, feel free to like and subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. The baker tells the same joke he told last year, and you still pretend not to know the punchline. A goose waddles through the crowd like it's inspecting the party for tax violations. Not loud, not wild, just stillness and good company. Someone tries to juggle apples and almost takes out the church window. You might just make it through this day after all. She winks. Don't let Thomas tell you about the goat stars again. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The sky is darker now, inked with twilight, and the torches flicker in the cooling breeze. Both, in this case, you raise it to your nose and instantly regret having a nose. The liquid inside is sharp, herbal, and carries the unmistakable warning of don't operate heavy medieval machinery after consuming. Your cup has disappeared, either emptied, lost to the grass, or adopted by someone less You walk out of your cottage into the muddy lane that bisects your village in the day. Today's special, it's St. Wigmund's Day. That means a small feast later, a sermon you may or may not nap through, and most importantly, but if the brew went bad, villagers might blame spirits, sin, or a neighbor they already disliked. Superstition and fermentation made quite the pairing, because in the Middle Ages, celebration often meant drinking, and drinking meant surviving the same winter 3 years in a row without weeping openly in a cabbage field. Major historical fact, ale was safer than water in many medieval towns. You pass the alewives' cottage. Ethel, round-faced and cheerfully loud, is already stirring her brew. Don't forget your cup later, she says, voice warm as toast. You nod, you'll bring the cracked one anyway. Weird cultural tidbit. Some villagers believed putting a rusty nail into the brewing vat would strengthen the ale. Historians still debate whether this habit was medicinal, magical, or just one of those ideas someone had after drinking too much of the previous batch. You walk on, past the church, past the baker, past the goose that once bit your ankle and has never shown remorse. You smile, because while this world might be cold and muddy, it's also oddly lovely, and you haven't even had your first drink. By midday, the village is buzzing. The sun sits low and warm in the sky, casting a buttery glow over everything. You make your way toward one of the tables, where the ale is already being passed around like it's blessed, which for some, it practically is. The cup in your hand is wooden, slightly chipped, and smells faintly of last week's onions. You raise it, sip. It's warm, yeasty, slightly sour, and honestly, not bad. Major historical fact. Brewing was often the work of women alewives who managed the entire process from grain to mug. Ethel passes by again, carrying another jug, this one with a carved handle shaped like a rabbit. You laugh. Too late. The ale is flowing more freely now, and so are the stories. Someone sings, badly but they mean it. You find a seat on a wobbly bench beside a man with wild eyebrows and a tunic that has more patch than fabric. Weird cultural tidbit. In some areas, ale was blessed by priests before feasts, and drunk as part of religious celebration. Historians still debate whether some medieval feasts blurred into drinking festivals by accident, or whether that was the plan all along and nobody remembered to write it down. The sky begins to shift, that deep medieval blue creeping in. Candles appear, torches are lit. You lean back, cup in hand, and feel a kind of quiet joy that's hard to name. The kind that tastes like warm ale, slightly burnt pie, and a long story about a goat that may or may not have stolen a ring. And as the stars blink on one by one, you think, you wake up from what may have been a nap or just a long blink. The feast is winding down. But the drinking, oh, the drinking is just changing gears. Someone starts passing around a ceramic bottle sealed with wax. It looks important, which usually means it's either very expensive or dangerously homemade. You're handed a small wooden shot cup, more of a thimble really. Still, you're here, you sip, and it burns. Not in a cruel way, more like a small dragon is politely clearing its throat inside your chest. Someone claps your back as if to belch out the fire. At first they were used mostly for medicine or religious purposes. A child runs by with a turnip on a stick, which is either a toy or a warning. You're not sure. Winners got local fame, losers got mocked. Occasionally, these events included impromptu songs and roasts, medieval talent shows, but with less talent and more yeast. Then someone realized they were also excellent for forgetting how long winter is, and you do that awkward smile that says, no, I'm totally fine and not silently reassessing my life. Major historical fact. Distilled spirits, like early versions of brandy or began to spread through Europe in the late Middle Ages. You glance across the green and see two old men arguing over whether the moon is larger during feasts, or if the ale just makes it seem that way, or if everyone was just too tipsy to remember who stole whose lyrics. Weird cultural tidbit. In some villages, certain holidays included a custom called ale tasting, where villagers would literally judge and rank each other's brews. Just a warm drink, a firelight song, and a night where the sky seems a little closer than usual. You let the notes stretch out, slow and deliberate, like the path of candle wax down a cold stone wall. The night is cool, not cold, just enough to make you wish you'd brought that second cloak you stubbornly refused earlier. A candle flickers behind one stained glass window, probably Brother Al, who says he's always praying but occasionally snores in Latin. You're full, maybe a little too full, and not just of food and drink, but of not silence. Medieval places are never truly quiet, but a sort of hushed shuffle. Not necessarily for safety from crime, but to prevent accidental fires. A single spark in a thatched village could mean disaster. A cow sighs in a nearby barn. A rooster, confused as always, crows once, then seems embarrassed. Something else. Historians still debate whether some of the songs sung during these tastings were passed down orally for generations. Not from the drink, but from the weight of the day, and maybe the drink, but mostly the day. You settle in, pull your thin wool blanket over your shoulders, and lie back. You owe 3 onions and a prayer. But for now, your only job is sleep. A woman nearby is singing something melodic and haunting, accompanied by a lute that has been repaired so many times it hums like it is part wooden instrument, part ghost. You sit and listen, you look up, stars everywhere, and you realize that this right now is the closest thing this village has to magic. The fire has long since gone out, leaving behind a faint smell of ash and the kind of cozy that only soot can provide. As a result, certain villagers would place garlic, herbs, or even iron nails near their sleeping spots just in case the ale wore off and something spookier wandered in. No spells. There's a dull throb behind your eyes, perhaps the ale or maybe the lute solo that lasts the 3 songs too long. You stretch your one shoulder crack, then decide that's enough exercise for today. The hour grows late. That specific, sleepy time where laughter becomes gentler and words start to stretch out like yawns. Alfie has tied a ribbon around his pig's tail, which is either payment or presentation depending on how the bailiff's feeling today. Onions, eggs, chickens, or even a bucket of ale could all count as official payments, depending on the agreement. Currency wasn't always in your pocket, it might be growing in your garden. It was less of a ceremony and more of a mutual reminder not to burn down the bakery or steal someone else got again. His boots are clean, suspiciously clean, as if he hasn't walked through a single puddle this season. A kind of contentment that can't be botanly brewed. Your shoes are exactly where you left them. By the door, slightly damp, eternally resentful. You slip them on and trudge towards your small garden patch, where your finest onions, 3 of them, are waiting. Accepts a jar of honey here, a wheel of cheese there. He inspects your onions. You find yourself wandering away from the gathering, past the torches, down a familiar dirt path lined with tall grasses swaying like they re-whispering things best not repeated. You pass the church again. Its stones are worn and mossy. Your feet crunch softly along the packed earth. There's a stillness to the village now. Major historical fact. Many medieval communities had strict curfews. Bells would ring to signal the time when fires had to be doused and doors shut. Of course, this didn't stop people from sneaking off from midnight conversations or, more often, a secret swig of something they definitely didn't declare on their tax inventory. You sit for a moment on a low stone wall, your hands tucked into your sleeves like you're protecting secrets. Somewhere, an owl calls once, then twice. Your breath fogs slightly as you exhale. Even in a world without clocks, this hour feels unmistakably like the tail end of something. Weird cultural tidbit. Some folks believe that drinking heavily before bed would keep bad dreams away. Others thought it invited them. Historians still debate whether these nighttime charms were true attempts at spiritual defense or. You finally stand and head home, weaving just slightly. Your little cottage greets you with the familiar creak of its door and the dry rustle of your straw bedding. Tomorrow, the tax collector might come. And here, in this quiet, flickering world of woodsmoke ale songs and starlit paths you drift, morning comes like a sheep in disguise. Soft at first, then abrupt, then slightly damp. The sun rises slowly behind the thatched rooftops, sending shafts of warm light across your floorboards, each one highlighting how uneven the floor really is. Your head is ... present. That's the nicest way to put it. You sit up carefully, like a sack of oats trying to decide if it's worth it. Outside, the village is stirring again. But today, the energy is shifted. Because today, the bailiff is coming, and you still owe those onions. Major historical fact. In many medieval towns, peasants paid part of their taxes or rent to local lords in the form of goods, not coins. You step outside and instantly feel the chill of morning dew on your feet. One of them has started to flower, which feels symbolic. You ignore it. Down the lane, other villagers are preparing to. Maud is polishing her best egg basket. You clutch your onions like a bouquet of slightly bitter roses and make your way to the center of the green. Weird cultural tidbit. In some villages, tax day included something called the veuf, where all male villagers had to swear loyalty and good behavior. Historians still debate whether the onion payments were genuinely fair barter, or if lords just really liked soup. The bailiff arrives just before midday. Yes, not imposing, just tall enough to look over most heads and just fussy enough to adjust his cloak every 3 steps. He nods, says little. He picks one up, sniffs it, you freeze, he nods, you exhale. He moves on, your debt. For now, is paid. With the tax drama behind you and your onions now part of the regional economy, you reward yourself in the only way that makes sense by sitting on a log and watching your neighbor's chickens argue. It's oddly therapeutic. One of them seems convinced the other owes it a worm. Around the village, people are slowly returning to their routines. Someone mends a fence. Someone else looses a boot in the mud. A child climbs halfway up the church bell rope before being gently extracted by Brother Alred, who seems less surprised than he should be. You think about walking somewhere just to stretch your legs and give your brain something to do besides remember lute songs. You wander toward the edge of the green, where the grass meets a narrow path lined with gorse bushes. The wind rustles gently, and then you hear it, a cheerful hum, a hiccup, then a familiar voice. It's Ethel, the alewife. Again, she's pouring something thick and golden into a jug, whistling off-key and muttering about whether this batch is too hopeful. You sit near her fire, where a copper kettle bubbles gently, smelling of apples, spice, and possibly mischief. Brewing wasn't just for preservation. It was a source of warmth, celebration, and social bonding. You can taste cloves in something that might be thyme or might be whatever she grabbed from her garden in the dark. Recipes varied by region, but most included a mix of herbs, fruit, and the ever-popular just enough to forget the mud. Others believed it just gave you weird dreams about talking geese, watching the steam curl into the cool afternoon air. No one quite agreed, but the ivy stayed in the recipe just in case. Major historical fact. Mulled drinks, hot spiced ales, or ciders were common in colder seasons. You're not even entirely sure what day it is. You are not being yelled at by a goose. Ethel hands you a cup, you take a sip. It's warm, bright, slightly smoky. You smile anyway. Weird cultural tidbit. Some medieval brewers believed that adding crushed ivy to the mix could enhance the mood. Historians still debate whether some brewing herbs were chosen for flavor, folklore, or just to cover up a questionable aftertaste. You lean back, cup in hand, and for a moment, nothing moves but the wind, the fire, and the slow turn of the seasons. You're not rich, you're not powerful, but you are warm. You are fed. And in the Middle Ages, that's a victory worth celebrating.